All right, get everybody sort of settled in. The room is very quiet, so there's not a lot to remove on this, which that's cool. So we're just gonna, if you've listened to the show, there's sort of a lead in. Carl and I banter back and forth. Okay, so you just have to imagine that, because we'll add that in. All right, we're here in Bulgaria at the DevReach conference, and we're doing another panel discussion. This one focused on Node, and I would like to introduce our panelists, or better still, let's have our panelists introduce themselves, starting with Farah and Tara.
Hi, I am Tara Mniksik. I'm a developer advocate for progress on the Kinvey team and a Google developer expert in web technologies. I started the Women Who Code branch in Cincinnati and also helped start the Node School branch in Cincinnati. And if you're interested in getting started with Node, I highly recommend nodeschool.io, trying that out. And I also guest host and am the program manager for for a Node-centric podcast called Always Forward with D. Shaw. So some stuff to check out there.
Hang on one sec.
Am I knocking?
Yeah, somehow. And I don't think it's you. It might be a wire problem. Those are bad knocks, too. You just chase that a little.
Well, I do knock-knock jokes, so it
all right.
could be,
Do one now.
yeah. Which one should I do? I don't want to get you.
Say something nice, Tara.
Something nice, Tara.
That was pretty nice.
I think she might be getting some breath noise.
There you go. And a little bit of breath noise is being par for the course. I'm not going to get too anxious about that. All right, well, we'll see if that's the end of the knocking, but
Okay.
welcome. Thank you.
I'll sit still.
Yeah, okay. I don't know how to necessarily that. Brandon?
Hi, I'm Brandon Satram. I work for a IoT hardware platform company called Particle, where I'm a developer advocate for them and help spread the hardware love to software developers all over the world. I am by trade a long-time and recovering front-end developer and a self-described and aspiring maker. And by evenings and weekends, I also run a publishing company called Carrot Paint Studios, where we build products designed to help get kids interested in the world of electronics.
Awesome. And yeah, the gadgetry of IoT, kids go crazy for it. As long as you can make it move or make a noise.
It's shiny and it lights up.
Yeah. What more do you want?
Yeah.
And Mr. Neal?
Hey, I'm David Neal. I go by Reverent Geek on the Twitters and social media and so forth. I am currently a senior developer advocate for Okta, who does authorization and identity management. I am a recovering .NET developer currently on the Node.js and Electron, all the JavaScript things these days. And I'm entirely made of bacon.
You're keto friendly.
Very cute.
Very, very keto friendly. Yeah, I guess it's a little bit of a JavaScript-centric conversation. The show's called .NET Rocks, but we care about what .NET developers care about, and it's pretty powerful stuff. Why do you focus on Node, David? What does it do for you?
Well, I've been a web developer since the late 90s, and I grew to have this love-hate relationship with JavaScript, and eventually I just gave in and embraced it for what it is.
I thought it was a hate-hate relationship,
well,
actually.
With recent advances in the JavaScript language, it's not that bad, as bad anymore.
Ringing
And-
endorsement. Not that bad.
You sure it's not just Stockholm Syndrome? Like,
Maybe. But, when Node came out, it was kind of on my radar, and it was something I really wanted to investigate. And once I started using Node, it's like I kind of fell in love with programming all over again. And that's what I've been doing ever since.
wow, it's interesting to be an experienced developer, and there's things about Node that make you happy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a profound thing. I guess you're going to be our IoT advocate, Brandon.
I could do that. Happy
I
to.
bet.
Yeah.
But is JavaScript, when you talk about really lightweight gear like that, is JavaScript the way to go? It's not known for being ultra lightweight.
And part of it, that's a great question. I think part of it is sort of changing the understanding of what an IoT application really looks like or what it entails.
Right.
The embedded systems piece of that, still a lot of the work happens with C, C++. Those are not scary languages, by the way. I highly encourage folks to check out those types of embedded systems in your free time. But when you're building an embedded system, there's so much of the work now in the IoT space that goes beyond the device itself, beyond the sensing, beyond the actuating, but actually getting data into the cloud, building web and mobile and cloud applications that actually work with those devices, work with those sensors and the data that come in from those devices. And really there, JavaScript is the lingua franca of what you have available in that space, whether it's a mobile app or web app or even a cloud app today. So we in Particle and me personally are very interested in the JavaScript community, and we do a lot of our work in the Node space as well, because that's really where we see a lot of the actual real IoT applications being built beyond the devices themselves.
And I understand you sat very strategically to keep Tara and David separated.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Because you
I
disagree?
really love bacon.
Okay. Yeah. No, I can appreciate that. Yeah. No.
But to tag on and jump on the IoT chain, that's one of the great things about the asynchronous architecture of Node and the fact that you have the non-blocking, event-driven. You have so many data sources coming in from IoT devices, like so much data that one of the best ways to handle it is with Node, especially those data sources between your back end and the devices. Node is just made to handle that huge amount of data.
What makes it better?
The asynchronous architecture.
Okay.
And the fact that it's non-blocking.
Right.
So you're able to basically stream in all of that information at once, which is really nice.
Like Tara said, depending on the number of event sources you have and the number of devices, real IoT applications typically involve a lot of sensors, all
Right.
streaming data in concurrently, reading sensor data every millisecond, microsecond, what have you, and all of that data coming in, you need to be able to parse it quickly, not get backlogged, not get blocked, and then send it on and do something with it.
And it's just this sort of nature of Node that every instance is specific to the occurrence, like you're naturally stateless. Like you can
Yep.
do this in C#. I just think you have to work at it to do it right in C#.
I think that's right.
And who likes working? Yeah.
Yeah. Nobody here wants to work. Well, and I see serverless up in the artwork here on the board too. Does it just mean that do we look at Node as essentially serverless?
Well, I put that up there because a lot of the serverless functions that are out there support Node or support JavaScript, and so
Right.
it kind of lends itself to be a great host environment for serverless functions.
It's just, but then in that sense, how much of it is Node and how much of it is just language? Like, how do we separate the two? What is distinctly Node-ish?
Getting silly.
Well, Node is essentially just a very small bits of framework on top of the JavaScript V8
Right.
engine.
Right.
So there's only they only added on top of V8 the bare minimum needed for HTTP communications and file I/O for and events and streaming.
Right.
And when you're doing serverless functions with Lambda or with an Azure function, those frameworks or that infrastructure is doing the npm install, all that stuff is actually still happening for you. You're just not spinning up a container. You're not spinning up a server. It's all there. It's still Node under the covers. You're using JavaScript as the language there, but it's Node that's actually handling package management and execution.
So
at
it's a
runtime.
declaration in Node about a service you need that under the hood then is doing the npm call
Right.
and setting things up.
Right.
But how long does that take? I don't look at package managers for their speed.
So when you deploy a Lambda function or an Azure function, it's similar to doing any sort of other CI process or
Right.
deployment to a server. You don't have to specify everything like you do if you're running your own server, you're running inside a Docker container or something
Right.
like that. There is still a time involved. There's a deployment step, but once it's there, the function executes anytime its endpoint is hit
Right.
immediately.
And the instance management and so forth is just automatic in serverless. Like
Yeah.
this is where we get into the aspects that really are serverless. It's not that plumbing doesn't exist, it's that you don't own it.
Right.
And you don't have a lot of control over it either too. So it
Right.
better be set up the way that makes you happy.
Right.
If you had a comment.
I was just curious. No, I didn't know what the cord was coming. I was wondering how attached I was to it.
There's a wire and it's thin and fragile. If you
That's-
jump up and run across the room,
She's trying to decide if
it's
she can
going to
leave.
lose. At best, it'll try and pull your ear off, but more likely the wire will not survive.
Just checking.
But I'm grateful for your checking. That's a good thing. I'm glad you're doing that. Can we talk about a particular project? Anything you guys are really excited about? Things you've made?
Oh, I thought you meant in regards to Node.
I was in regards to Node.
I mean, what's coming out with Node? So we just got Node 10 marked as LTS and got a Node 11 release as current. But they've been doing a ton of work with HTTP2, and I'm a little excited about HTTP2. I just did a talk specifically on HTTP2 at .js in Paris last week, because there's a lot of things that HTTP2 was really hindering us with development, with web development in particular. Like basically, we were making all these workarounds to make our sites faster and stronger, but still having to use HTTP1. And it took quite a long time for us to get to HTTP2. Nonetheless, the Node team put a lot of effort into making sure that we had a lot of the different strategies from HTTP2 wrapped up in Node. And the team's been doing a lot of work that we have things like server push, which
Right.
now allows you to use basically the multiplexing strategy of being able to pass multiple resources over one connection, over one TCP connection. So now with Node, you can, basically say, when you load this, also load these things. Let the server know what you want to send through, so you're not doing multiple calls, which is great for not only developers, but the fact as users, we don't need to know what's going on. It's just the web is faster now for us. So that's really nice. I'm very excited about
So
that.
the main thing about HTTP2, and this has been true for most folks, is just this idea of everything comes down at once. The limited number of connection thing goes away.
Yeah, and it's mostly because with HTTP2, now it's binary instead of textual,
Right.
which that binary format is letting us break everything down into these small messages that we can send more and have streams streams can go bidirectional. So we can have multiple streams running at the same time. So it just basically
And you're talking about stuff streaming from the browser back to the server, as well as streaming from the server back down to the browser.
Yeah, and multiple streams
Multiple.
at once from each direction. So yeah, it's like a concept that we've used. Like Node has a really great stream API in general.
Yeah.
So it's like teaming up all of these concepts that we have to work on the web for our users that finally let us have the technology catch up with the data that we need for websites nowadays.
Yeah, what kind of streams are we talking about? Like, what do you, I could see it in the IoT context where I'm just constantly sending messages.
Yeah, and I mean, you're constantly sending requests and responses
Right.
now. So that's the kind of stream information that you have. Like these messages are just, a bunch of messages is collated is basically your get and your requests and your responses.
And in the context of IoT, this is actually really valuable because one of the things that I think a lot of folks don't think much about until they get into prototyping an IoT solution is when you are doing request response every time you're reading a sensor and then you're sending that payload back, a lot of your payload is overhead, is the
Right.
headers, it's the acknowledgement,
Yeah,
setting up
because
the
your packages
connection.
are actually pretty small.
Absolutely, absolutely. So some folks will roll UDP on their own, or they'll deal with implementing their own TCP stack, et cetera. But this idea of being able to have a server that allows you to maintain a connection or a socket or a stream,
Right.
and being able to pass data and then not worry about that overhead. Because when you're on Wi-Fi, it's fine, but if you're on cellular and now you're paying for messages, you're thinking about a data plan.
Right.
Now you really, really have to get your payloads as small as possible. And
Yeah,
that can be really
and why,
valuable.
and especially to burn it on overhead.
All right,
And I'm going to interrupt you for just a moment for this very important message.
Can we make a message up?
Spay and neuter your children. And we're back. It's Richard Campbell here in Bulgaria at the DevReach conference, second day, towards the end of the day, so we're all just a little bit silly. And it's the Node development panel, and I've got David Neal and Brandon Satram and Tara. I'm going to tackle your last name. Is it Menisic?
Menixic.
Menixic.
Pretty close.
Well,
yeah.
almost got there.
That's
Tricky. Okay, yeah, this, got a few consonants there. You gotta be careful with it.
There's a decent amount of letters in there.
Yeah, no question. What's the stack? What is your tooling for building Node apps these days?
I guess I'll go first.
Sure.
I do a lot of different kinds of applications over the last few years, and when I'm building server applications, I prefer the Happy stack.
Happy stack.
Happy was created by Walmart Labs, and it's an alternative to Express, and it's got great support for building APIs and
So
server-
HAPY? What is-
HAPI.
HAPI. And
Yep.
what are those ingredients?
And Well, it comes from like Ren and Stimpy, and all the components and everything that are part of the ecosystem have silly names.
Right.
So it's a lot of fun to work with, but
Yeah, because I noticed Node isn't in the list, and there's no N in Happy.
right, yeah. So it's not like the mean stack or something like that.
Right.
Happy is just the name of
The
it.
Node
Right.
framework.
And so I really like the Happy Stack for doing Node apps. I've also built a number of command line applications, and I'll usually use something like Yargs or Commander to parse command line arguments. That makes it really easy to work with. And then I've built a number of Electron applications, which are desktop applications
Sure,
built
GitHub's library.
with Node.
Or is it
And
now Microsoft's library?
right. So GitHub created Electron for the Atom editor, and Microsoft
VS Code.
took that and created VS Code.
Yeah.
And there's been a number of other applications that have been created with Electron.
Anything special that you have to do to build an Electron app? Is it just use use that library that's got a compile step?
Yeah, so you can use whatever front-end technologies you want to. It's not, doesn't dictate what you want to use. So you
Sure.
can use just plain jQuery, or you can use Vue or React or Angular or something like that. Even saw today where Galloway was talking about using Blazor in an Electron.
Love it.
I mean, just mind-blowing.
Yeah. Oh, wait, I'm going to write code in C#, stick it into a browser, compile it into an Electron app to make a desktop app.
Right.
That's not twisted at all.
So, but Electron is in the beginning is just a standalone executable, and you can take there's already pre-compiled executables for every platform, so you can take that along with your HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and give that to someone. There's no dependencies, nothing else that they have to install or run. So that's kind of the first line of defense for deploying Electron applications.
Nice. All right.
I will make a note. So the guy who built Happy, Aaron Hammer, has really great talks in the Node community in general, and I highly recommend checking them out. And he just did one for Node Summit where he built a whole stage for his talk.
A stage?
Oh yeah, like a stage design with paper props and everything, and talking about cookies and whatnot. So, yeah, it's for a good time. Watch
Physical
these
stuff?
videos, yeah. Oh yeah.
Digital
awesome.
people building physical stuff.
What a world.
That's, what's going on? That's crazy.
That's IoT development.
There
Come
you
on.
go. Yeah, just how all of that little hardware
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
we've recently done shows around some more little hardware. Like it's
There's new stuff every day.
yeah, and there's so much power in such small form factors. But it's nice to be getting. I mean, you said very casually about programming in C++ being that's not a big deal, and it's like it's kind of a big deal to a lot of people. They'd rather work in a friendlier language, quote unquote.
Yeah, well, and I think part of it, honestly, I think C++ can be intimidating for sure. Although if you love semicolons and you love JavaScript, you're going to love C++ because it won't let you mess up anything. So it's perfect in that regard.
It's just
However,
like JavaScript.
The tooling has made it a lot easier. It used to be if you were going to do C++ development, your first question was, how do I get a compiler on my machine?
Right.
And then your second question is, where's the installation disk so I can reinstall the operating system because this compiler paved my machine completely and it didn't work, right? And so nowadays the tool chain's problem is largely solved. If you work with a vendor, Visual Studio Code actually makes a lot of this stuff really easy. I mean,
Wow.
you asked the question of everybody's sort of preferred development stack. For me, it starts and ends because I spend equal parts of my day doing firmware, web, mobile, and cloud development. I do a lot of my work in VS Code because I can target an embedded system or I can target the web, mobile via VS Code, and that's really powerful.
But are you
And so-
tending to code mostly in JavaScript in all of those platforms?
other than embedded. So when I'm
Right.
doing anything with embedded, I'm using C++, but beyond that, it is JavaScript. And
Right.
so whether it's, in the case of mobile, shout out to NativeScript, absolutely love NativeScript, but I do mobile development with JavaScript and NativeScript and web development with Vue, and then with stuff I do in the cloud, I actually I'm intending to do serverless more and more because I find it really interesting. I built an Alexa skill earlier this year that actually interfaces with Particle's Device Cloud API to control devices, and I did all that using Lambda because it was sort of, it's Amazon's preferred approach, but B, it was like easy development experience. You can actually use the serverless framework. I don't know if others of y'all have taken a look at that, but serverless actually gives you desktop and command line tools for managing serverless functions and automatically deploying those
And this
to
is
your cloud of
serverless
choice.
framework for Node, or is this serverless?
It is a
framework?
Node package. So it's if you
Yeah.
go to serverless, I think it's serverless JS. Just look that up or Google that with Bing, whatever
Yep.
your preferred choice is.
I'll bang it with Google.
Bing it with Google. There you go. And it actually has support for Azure functions, has support for Lambda functions as well, and you can do your development locally, but then deploy to your serverless
Right.
framework of choice.
Well, in my mind, IoT battles the same thing that all mobile development does as well, which is you're coding on a machine that's very different from what it's going to be run on.
Absolutely.
And so that dev cycle is challenging. It's longer. It's more complicated.
Right.
I got to think, especially when you get into some IoT hardware, like, do you even try and emulate, or do you have to just deploy to the device to even have any idea what's going on?
You can typically deploy to the device. I mean, the good news there is that IoT devices tend to be drastically cheaper than buying new mobile devices.
Right.
So you're talking $20 for a new device versus a few hundred. I know Android devices can be quite a bit cheaper, but deploying to the device tends to be a choice. And then the tool chain there has actually gotten so much better that a lot of embedded platforms will support over-the-air firmware updates. So as long as your device is connected via Wi-Fi or cellular, you can push new firmware without having to physically connect it to your computer. So you have a lot more options there.
And as soon as you poke on that sort of angle of those issues around IoT, I immediately think about the security pieces. And I think that, can we talk a little about the security conversation for Node?
Yeah.
Because I don't know that it defaults to a secure strategy, that folks actually have to think about how they're going to work in Node to implement security. No? Nobody?
Well, from the server standpoint, if you're using a framework like Express or Happy, they've already built into those some safeguards around like cross-site scripting and those angles.
Right.
So just like you would expect building on any modern web framework, that's kind of handled for you out of the box.
And defaulting to TLS. What about authentication strategies?
There's lots of options. You know, you got all of NPM at your fingertips. So the most common is to use session cookies with. I'm trying to think of the name of the package. Anyway, there's a package out there for adding authentication, and then there's frameworks like Okta and Auth0 and so
Right.
forth that give you even more tools that make it very easy to add to secure your application.
Right.
And Node 10 LTS shipped with the updated OpenSSL package as well
Right.
for your secure socket layer. So that comes standard with Node 10 now.
I think this is also an area where the serverless frameworks tend to excel, because in a lot of those cases you're relying on their security infrastructure
Right.
as well. So the same way you would secure a Docker container or an EC2 instance, you have that baked into working with Lambda, or in the case of Azure, using Azure functions.
Well, it's the nice thing about using the public cloud, whichever one you use, is they want to bill you, so you kind of have to have authentication stuff going on anyway, and
Right.
you just add it to your app
Right.
and API management, and like it's an awful lot of plumbing that's hard work to do on-prem. It's pretty easy to do in the cloud.
And as far as like TLS, a lot of people will tend to front node apps with Nginx. And
Right.
so you
Yeah.
manage your certificates and everything there. And so you as a node developer, you're not really.
You don't have to deal with
You
it.
don't have to deal with it.
Yeah.
You're just part of your deployment.
Right. It's great. All right, and this is the next break. So this is the one where Carl will make up a joke and we'll all laugh. You don't have to laugh. And then we actually insert an ad. It'll probably be a progress ad. I'm just guessing. And then we talk about giving away that $5,000 package, right? That one lucky person each year gets $5,000 worth of goodies. And then it cuts back to me because I get to ask all of you. So if you had $5,000 to spend on technology, what would you buy? Mr. Neal, any thoughts?
Yes, the new iPad Pro just came out.
Yeah, that'll
And
be fine. You know, all Apple stuff is expensive.
Yep.
It
And
might cost you about
I think
$5,000.
actually it's $5,000. I think you get,
$5,000.
you get two as long as you don't have any adapters. Okay.
And one Apple Pencil.
And lots of dongles.
Yes.
And
and
so-
mini dongles.
No, the new iPad Pro has got the new Apple Pencil that is magnetic and charges wirelessly, which is awesome because I use the old iPad Pro and you have to, it's like a selfie stick or whatever. It's like a really bad selfie stick.
Hey, those iPad Pros are looking more and more like Surface Pros every day.
Yeah.
That's good. Thank goodness.
I think I love my iPad Pro, and
Yeah.
I think it's awesome.
Just lightweight, semi-business. I need to do some type, not too much, but it's interesting to see the pen come into that space.
Yeah.
It's cool. Brandon?
Other than spending $5,000 for David to give me a private course on how to draw,
Yeah.
I think what I would probably do, I'll give the maker answer as a hardware guy. There's a 3D printer company called Prusa. And Prusa makes a printer called the MK3 that is one of the most phenomenal 3D printers that I've ever seen. I have a 3D printer, and I have 3D printer envy because I don't have the Prusa MK3. It has a quad extruder, so you can 3D print in 4 colors with 4 different
At the
types
same
of
time?
filament
It's
at the same time.
Still ABS PL?
Still ABS
okay?
PLA,
Yeah.
and it actually works with works with things like bamboo fill and other types of filament and things
Nice.
like that.
Because
Really
I've always had a
fascinating.
soft spot for the resin printers. Like if I was really going to spend money.
That's true, and they are. Prusa is coming out with a resin printer, so maybe I'd buy one of each
There you
for
go.
$5,000.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
that'd be
Because
good to go.
correct number of 3D printers is more, apparently.
That's exactly right. Yeah, because there's always more to print. So,
4 colors at once. That's
Yeah.
indulgent. I like that.
Yeah.
All right. Tara?
So I've actually never thought about this. I tend to put blinders on and focus on what I have.
Yes. No, I
Stay
think
away
that, and it
from
gets
it.
very healthy.
And then, since I switched off of all Apple products, I don't have any reason, like nothing breaks in order for me to have to buy a new one.
It just works.
Just works
Amazing.
until it upgrades. Then it needs to be replaced.
But I think I would actually invest in research with food 3D printing. I think that's much more up my alley as an investment for more food.
Yes,
Yeah.
and fun pancakes, right? Like
Yeah.
pancakes
Oh,
with heart.
Can I print bacon?
Oh my God.
You just got to find the right pig.
Pig filament.
maybe in our lifetimes, David.
One can only hope.
Wow, no, it's just an automatic bacon weaver. There you go.
A man can dream.
Yeah. I would like sheets of bacon, please. Bacon filament. All right. Boy, how are we going to talk about Node after bacon filament?
I mean, I think that has to be the title of your podcast, right?
Yeah.
Bacon filament.
the bacon filament
This
conversation.
is why your last .NET Rocks was 2 minutes, because you went on to something like bacon filament.
I know,
Changed the topic.
Carl's a big fan of bacon. There's no two ways about it. I don't. I think the few photographs I actually post on Twitter tend to be bacon bombs. So, at least on more than one occasion.
Nice.
I never did hear your preferred dev stack there, Tara.
Well, it's interesting because one of the things that I think is really great about Node and why Node has been adapted so much is the fact that it's made so well as developer. It's a developer-friendly language. Like you were saying with C++, it's not as human readable, human friendly. I started in JavaScript or in Java in school,
Right.
and as soon as I found JavaScript, I was like, "Get me out of here!" It's like, oh, I don't have to use Eclipse anymore. This is fantastic. So,
Tooling.
so I'm on a Windows machine and I'm using Ubuntu for Windows because I am a Vimmer. So I really good joke.
Thank you.
comment. But yeah, so as far as coding in Node, what makes it really great is the fact that you don't have to have too much tooling around you. You do pull from the package management ecosystem a lot, and everything about Node, well, JavaScript as well, is very modularized and set around bringing the tools in together that you need. I started working on the Kinvey team and have been using Kinvey as my backend and they have like flex functions, great things with security, and just a bunch of tooling that help you basically build a bunch of services out without having to spend the dev time on it, without having to spend a lot of time, jumping into code and writing a ton of code. So being able to do that on the back end lets me focus a lot more on the creations that I make on the front end, and then because of that, I'm basically just in the command line, keeping it very nerdy.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it does seem that a lot of Node folks I talk to are serious about the command line. Like that's where they prefer to work. Although VS Code also wildly popular. But what do you use as an editor? I presume it's not Vim.
It is Vim.
It is Vim.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you have a
so these
very-
pre-show jokes, they were no jokes.
Yeah.
Okay.
They have a very extensive or very detailed VimRC. I would use VS Code. There are things I like about VS Code, and I keep getting on the team because when you use Vim command shortcuts, Vim mode on VS Code, you lose keyboard shortcuts for VS Code. Which, who wants to move their hands away from the keyboard, you know?
No, I'm totally with you. That's the whole point, right?
Yeah.
Especially for a Vim person, right? Yeah, you never take your hands off the keyboard. I remember resisting mice for a long time. It's like, why would you do that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That, and it made it look more like a foot pedal anyway.
Now, one of the things I really appreciate about Visual Studio Code is it's got great JavaScript debugging support. Not just for doing front-end development, but
Bugs in JavaScript?
No.
Perish the thought.
but it supports Node and it supports Electron, and you can do all the things that you expect. You can set breakpoints and you can inspect those variables and step through your code, and it works fantastic.
Edit and continue in JavaScript? Not that far.
Not
Right.
that
I've heard- that's a step too far. That's, you know, that's old school. But yeah, I do like that we can actually step through line by line in code.
Yeah.
And actually see what's going on and check the stack as we go. It's powerful. And that's the VS Code JavaScript debugger.
Yeah, and it even supports source maps as well. So if you're transpiling your code and are using something like a bundler, it can read in those source maps and know actually where to go in the original code to show you those breakpoints and step through.
Awesome. Any other tools? No? You just insert your own statements into stuff to debug code?
You use Logger.
Logger?
Standard is nice for linting. I really like being able to, one of the worst converstions you can have with a team is semicolons or not tabs.
I was
or
just going to say,
spaces.
let's have that argument now.
In my Node code that I just did in my talk, I wondered, I had no semicolons in any of my Node code, and I was like, I wonder.
I'll give you a high five. I'll give you a high five.
High
No one
five.
else will.
I'm going to move.
Hey, if you want semicolons, C++ has got lots of semicolons.
Yeah, in JavaScript you have as many semicolons as you want.
It's true, you can
and-
do a lot of
yeah.
them.
Yep.
But it's nice to have something like standard and that basically lets you set what you want all of your rules to be, so your team doesn't have to, you have the one initial argument and then it has to stick to the standard, and that's
Right.
really nice.
Little consistency between the devs too.
Yeah.
Right. And is everything GitHub these days? Is folks store their source anywhere else?
I mean, GitLab as well.
Yeah. Although I didn't think it really got more popular when Microsoft acquired GitHub.
Yeah,
And,
probably.
and if you did, you do know GitLab runs on Azure, right? What?
Microsoft's got you one way or the other, basically.
They want to be your
It's all
friend.
right. It's all right.
Really, really want to be your friend.
Right. But moving in the last year actually into more into the hardware world, I've been surprised to see that even into the hardware side of the world, there's still a preponderance of use of GitHub, all the way down to schematics and layout and design files to firmware and code. It is nearly universal among anyone that does design and development now at
Yeah.
this point.
Well, the number of folks, even in sitting here, that sent me a GitHub link for their bio and headshot.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know, it's just basically become part of the life.
Yeah.
And it does seem like the more contemporary tool. One of the spins I've taken in describing Node is to go back and talk about IIS and Apache as this was Swiss Army knives with every blade pulled out. Do you need anything? Here's everything. How about that? And then Node was literally the opposite and like, so you'd like a blade, would you? Tell me exactly which blade you would like.
NPM install your own blade.
Install your own blade. Yeah. But I wonder if that actually made the adoption curve of Node actually take a little bit longer.
Yes.
Because surely early Google searches around Node were, how do I start up an HTTP server with
Yeah.
this thing, right? And then the answer is Express, but it wasn't necessarily right away. And how long did it take where folks got kind of, okay, this is cool, this event loop, I get it, I don't get it, but how do I solve my problem? Because this is just a bare canvas for me to do something with.
Yeah,
And
one step at a time.
yeah, yeah.
And I do think it was literally the radical swing the other way. It's like,
Yeah.
no, let me tell you exactly what I want and nothing more.
Right.
but it just speaks to, I think, what modern development is now, which is this configuration as code mindset. Everything is declarative, everything runs, no documents. The document is the code. It's not a bad thing. You what, Tara?
It's
What?
kind of bad. Documentation is very important.
Yes, especially if you can execute it. That's great documentation.
Oh, that's fantastic. Oh. Executable API docs are so amazing.
Yeah.
It's the
No.
best thing ever. Yeah.
And, you know, I'm wearing my IT hat a lot these days. And, you know, there's not a Word doc in the world that dev's ever given me that was correct, because it immediately changes. It's
Right.
like literally you can feel the electron shifting as the file moves across the wire. It's like, yeah, no, that's almost right. This and this has changed now. It's like, you know, give me the thing I have to run. And then if it doesn't work, it's a bug, not
Yeah.
oh, no, that's close, but change this. I don't know. I get to turn into a grumpy old man. How did that happen? Been doing this for long enough. Maybe I don't have enough bacon in my life, David.
It helps.
Yeah, apparently it does. All Node in the cloud. How much are you running on-prem? Not it?
What's on-prem?
Yeah, what does on-prem mean exactly? What is this on-prem you speak of? I have cloud people sitting here. It's like this is where you run this stuff,
All in the cloud.
unless it's an edge device.
But I mean, none of the work. Now I know that there is definitely work, and this could be another episode altogether to talk about actually JavaScript on edge devices. But most of what I do and what Particle does is focused on C and C++ and embedded systems, and then everything beyond that from the edge to the cloud is JavaScript as much as possible.
Right.
So
And it's all basically cloud all the way
it's
up.
all
from
cloud,
there.
and the way that we pass data payloads around is JSON objects. So it's sort of built with this mindset of you're going to be using APIs, JavaScript to actually move data around.
Yeah, and you prefer not to own the back end, the hardware where it lives anyway.
Right.
It's just a waste of money,
Right.
ultimately.
Right.
Paid by the transaction. And same, it feels to me, serverless now is the closest to that. It's like only the transactions I use, that's what I pay for, and I don't pay for anything
Right.
else.
Yeah.
Oh, no, this is a little too simple. What's
Too
hard? What is hard in any of this?
Security is still hard. In
Is
spite
it?
of all of that, security, whether it's on the server or whether it's on edge devices.
Yeah, there's still a lot of responsibility. There's not a great security framework that everybody loves. It's like you install this and it makes you do the right things. It
Right.
makes you fall into the pit of success.
Right.
Because I've yet to find something to where I thought that was the experience, that it was just that nice.
Yeah.
And you think Node's already got this substantial bar to jump over to do the right things, to create the surface areas that you need.
Right.
Like just make security part of that process.
Yeah, I mean, the challenge is that I think a lot of us, and this has been my case with serverless, and I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, but I'm sure most of us have been in those cases where you set up something in a cloud system and you used the default policies from the vendor and things didn't work, so you just changed it to allow all access everywhere, and then you never went and turned it back off.
Yeah.
I mean, that's on us. That's not necessarily on the security frameworks. I mean, they try to give us sort of sensible defaults, but a lot of times when those things don't just work, we
No.
tend to go too far.
The whole
to
MongoDB
open.
exploit a couple of
Oh,
years
oh, yeah,
ago
yeah.
was exactly that. They recommended some security settings, but they were all off by default so that it wasn't a barrier to entry, and that's what got deployed.
Right. Absolutely.
So this, security on by default thing, I think it's necessary. It's just a question of whether it actually becomes enough of an impediment that it drives you off the product.
Right.
And I don't know the answer to that question. I wish I did.
Nor do I.
I wish you did. I would hope we actually get better on that. What's coming for Node? What are you looking forward to? You just got Node 11, so everything's perfect. We're done, finished.
Well, we're on 10 because that's the LTS.
Right.
But I mean, a lot of work that they're putting into Node, like one of the things that makes me really excited about Node is the adoption of like with V8. It used to not. We would break every time there was a V8 update.
Right.
Because they weren't paired together well. And then V8 made Node a first-class citizen.
So part of the build process for V8.
So no update of V8 will break because of Node.
Don't jinx it, Tara.
Well, there's a lot of people working to make sure that that's so.
Less likely.
But
Okay.
so it's really great to have that seamlessness between those two to really make sure that we don't always have to be checking for what's breaking. But on top of that, it's we have with ECMAScript working so closely with Node, we're making sure that a lot of the updates that come through ECMAScript are being put into Node very quickly, which is also just in part to ECMAScript in general, breaking down their releases to smaller chunks. Because, like I say, like ES6 wasn't named that for how many years it took to release.
Yeah.
But that is how many years it took to release.
Hey, the whole naming problems in the ECMAScript space gave me confidence that it's not just a Microsoft problem. Naming is hard.
Yes.
Yeah, and so so what's really nice is everything that's exciting about with new things coming for JavaScript, we're getting a Node immediately.
Right.
And so just how quickly, how fluid these things via ECMAScript and Node are working together makes it easier on us, the developers, to get more enhancements quicker and make our coding much faster and better.
Cleaner. It's a very different style of JavaScript to work in Node. Like, it doesn't look like JavaScript when I read it.
There's not that many differences.
No, it really isn't.
We do
It's just
have
not talking to a DOM. That's the big thing.
Well, yeah. But that's one thing that is really nice about being able to have JavaScript on front and back, is that a lot of the logic remains the same. A lot of what you're learning in the patterns remains the same. So there are a few things that actually the Node team is actively working on, like with module, like imports and require. It's different. One is synchronous, one is asynchronous. And so basically Node built their module system because a lot of users were wanting to modularize what they were doing and bring in parts of code. And then ECMAScript, came out with the ES6 modules, and they were incompatible. The interoperability wasn't there. So they're working hard to change that now so that we get even more seamless between the front and the back.
Right.
Which is really nice. And they're putting a lot of effort towards doing that. So soon, there's going to be some API work that needs done for web APIs to mash up with Node APIs and things like that. But to make it really, in that sense, as a developer, you can more easily jump back to front, work on different projects on a team. And as hiring managers, you can only hire JavaScript developers.
Right. For better or worse. I don't know exactly what that means. All right. What's in your inbox, David? What's next for you? More bacon.
Well, what I've been most recently exploring is TypeScript.
Yeah.
And using TypeScript with Node and Electron. And I'm still on the fence.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought.
I'm kind of exploring this because there's some demand to it. There's people asking, more and more development shops are moving to use TypeScript on the front end, and they're asking, can we use TypeScript with Node and with Electron? The answer is yes. The
question is it better?
Is it better or not?
Yeah. I spent some time with the Angular team who do everything in TypeScript, and they're all about the sustainability of TypeScript. That
Right.
long-lived projects, it seems to make sense. So in some ways, like you're only going to know if you've run a project for a few years.
Right.
With TypeScript at the center of it.
Yeah, unless you're building a very large, application where you've got teams of people working on the code base, may not have as much
Impact.
motivation to use TypeScript.
Sure. But it's also a big commitment to find out if that actually helped you when you
Right.
have that big of a code base.
I'm still kind of leaning towards ESLint, some good rules, and some good code coverage, and all those kinds of things are still a good discipline to have. Even if you choose to use TypeScript, those are all still good disciplines to have in your project. And I think get you pretty far without having to use something like TypeScript.
Awesome.
You don't think you're going to miss undefined is not a function?
It's an old friend.
I did that at the keynote, right? The error message from 1977. Sorry. Undefined is not a function. Sorry.
Yes.
They should have kept that in there.
It's a good one. No, I
Really
think
ease the blow.
I'm going to run with that. There's a lot of, error 503. Sorry. Brandon, what's next for you?
So one of the great things about getting to be a developer advocate for a company like Particle is that I get to tinker and build things and they pay me for it.
Yeah,
So
it's your job.
the rest of my year is actually going to be building a mesh network of synchronized holiday lights at my home. and Particle's footing the bill for that one, so hopefully they don't hear this.
That's a shame.
I'm really excited about that. So we've actually just released some new hardware that enables easier mesh networking. I got a whole bunch of NeoPixel strips that are just waiting for me to get them spread throughout the house and get them all synchronized. So
Awesome.
I'll be spending some time doing that, and then actually doing a Node app on the back end hosted that actually allows other people to control my lights from the cloud as well.
Because nothing could go wrong with that.
Nothing at all. Well, hey, I'm not gonna turn a display over to anybody else, so they can't type anything on the screen. It's just gonna be turning lights on and off.
Oh, come
Can-
on.
maybe not in my kids'
have
room.
some adventure.
Yeah.
I'll do it. You can turn on my kids' lights at 2 o'clock in the morning,
There you
anywhere
go.
you want.
Can I
Kinda
come
makes
live with
sense.
you?
Yeah, come on, David.
I want to work on this.
Yeah, come on.
Tara?
So I'm really excited. So I actually just recently started on the Convey team, and I'm really excited to get digging into our product because there's so much that it does, and like releasing a bunch of new videos for you all to see how Convey works, see my dog Tosh Magosh, but also cover.
Cutest dog ever. Cutest dog ever.
Thank you. I'll pass it on. But also just a bunch of fundamentals about Node in general, like reminding people how async await works, reminding how promises work, and scope in general and closure. Just because we can all use a little reminder on those things.
Sure.
And then next Tuesday, I have an episode of Always Forward coming on where I'm interviewing people about. They're on both the JS Foundation and the Node Foundation to talk about the current merger that's happening between the two foundations, which is really great for moving the code base forward and also just community outreach in general. Having these two foundations pair up should be really great. So.
It's cool. All right, big hand for our panel.
But I only have little hands.
And we'll talk to you next time on .NET Rocks. All right, that's it.